What's up top 10 fam, hope you're having an awesome day. I'm your host Aben Hassan and welcome back to another video. Now I live alone, you guys. How many times do I have to say this? I'm a small but fierce woman who lives alone, and reading all these scary home stories is just not good for my psyche, my anxiety, my being, just my life. But it's low-key fun, isn't it? Like a guilty pleasure that's gonna kill me. The other night I came home from a night out and I have OCD, so I triple check everything's locked and off before I leave the house. I came back and the door was already unlocked, and then every single scary house story I read was just flashing into my mind, and I was like, I'm gonna get killed in my sleep tonight. Clearly, it's a fact. But clearly I didn't, since I'm here hosting this right now, so here are the top 10 scary homes you should never move into part 2. Starting us off with number 10 is the Liu family mansion. Built in 1929, this Baroque style house is said to be one of the most haunted places in Taiwan. The 3-story house was abruptly abandoned by the Liu family in the 50s, and there are many theories as to why. The first is that the maid was having an affair with the master of the house, and embarrassed about being exposed, she committed suicide by throwing herself down the well. On the other side, another version of the story is that the wife found out and made the girl's life a living hell until she killed herself by throwing herself down the well. Whichever story you believe, apparently her spirit came back to haunt the family daily to the point they couldn't take it anymore and left the home. Now another story involves a bunch of Japanese soldiers billeting the mansion during World War II. One night a soldier saw a moving figure near the grounds and opened fire. Hearing the commotion, the other troops started shooting too, and by the morning every troop was dead since they'd all accidentally massacred each other. The mansion is gorgeous but in terrible disarray as well. It's overgrown with foliage, the inside is decrepit, and there's just way too much bad juju floating around this house for someone to move into it now. It is over. There's a dead girl in the well, there's a bunch of dead troops everywhere. It's over for you. I'm just being very dramatic right now. Coming in at number 9 is Villa de Vecchi, aka the House of Witches. Located near Lake Como and dubbed the most haunted house in Italy, it was built in the mid-1850s as a summer home for Count Felix de Vecchi. The family lived there for only a few years, since as soon as they moved in, their lives were overcome with tragedy. Firstly, the house's architect died 1 year before the villa was completed, and that really should have been like the first red flag omen. The next red flag came sometime in 1862 when Count Felix came home to find his wife brutally murdered and his daughter nowhere to be found. He searched for her for a full year with no luck before giving up and committing suicide himself. The house was passed on to his brother, who lived there till World War II, and by the 1960s it stayed abandoned. The house itself is white and covered in red patches which looks like blood even though it very much isn't. Surprisingly, an avalanche occurred in the area in 2002, destroying all the houses except this one. So I can't tell if that's good luck or curse. I don't really know. Since its abandonment, there were rumors that occultist Aleister Crowley spent some nights there in the 20s, which led to speculations of murders, ritualistic orgies, human and animal sacrifices, and much more. A grand piano in the property was smashed to pieces, but locals claim they can still hear it being played. So honestly, based on everything we've heard about this house, let's just leave it be. Shall we? Let's just leave it be. At number 8 we have the Jean Harlow house. It's always Hollywood related, isn't it? So this Bavarian style home in Beverly Hills was gorgeous, because it's usually the pretty houses that have the most gruesome histories, am I right? Either way, back in 1932 it was home to actress Jean Harlow, who everyone knows, and her husband Paul Byrne, who was a huge film director. They stayed there for barely even 2 months before Paul shot himself in the head in front of a mirror. The couple's butler ended up finding his body and suspiciously called MGM instead of calling the police. The death was ruled a suicide, but many speculated Jean killed him and MGM staff tampered with the evidence to make it look like a suicide. But it was confirmed later on that he was killed by his ex-wife Dorothy Millette, who then committed suicide a few days later by jumping off a boat. 30 years later, Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring moved into the house, and she reported seeing a creepy little man in the house that she believed was Paul's ghost. She once ran out of her room and saw a hanging shadowy corpse with a slit throat in the hallway. Apparently 2 other people died in the swimming pool of the house years prior, and let's not forget that Sharon was later murdered by the Manson family cult, so the house is just a no from me. There's too much bad shit that's gone on. There's no recovery. We cannot recover from this, you guys. it's over. Filling our number 7 slot is Franklin Castle. I know it's called a castle, but that's just a really bougie way of saying it was a mansion. Built in 1865 in Cleveland, Ohio, the mansion was home to German immigrant Hans Tiedemann, his wife and mother and all their kids, and boy did he have a lot of kids. Sadly, their time at the mansion was what can best be described as a show. Shortly after they moved in, Hans's 15-year-old daughter Emma passed away. Not long after that, Hans's mother died, and during the next 3 years, the couple buried 3 more children, which seemed extremely sus since that's a lot of death happening in a short span of time. Either way, by 1908, Hans finally died, and the mansion became a clubhouse for a German socialist party. The party apparently performed a mass assassination in the basement, and the house was even used as a hideaway for bootleggers during the Prohibition. But that's not all. Apparently Hans murdered his mistress in the front tower room with an axe, so reports have come in of people seeing her standing in the window of the castle. On top of that, there were secret tunnels and passages all over the house, and it's said that the passageways around the ballroom are where Hans hung his illegitimate daughter Karen. Karen's ghost has been seen countless times on the 3rd floor in a room known as the Cold Room. Cold since it's weirdly 10 degrees colder than the rest of the house. After that, the Romano family moved in and encountered ghosts after ghosts to the point their kids would ask for cookies to soothe the crying little girl. All in all, Franklin Castle has seen some Now at number 6 is the scratching. So this story was shared by an anonymous person who said when she was around 8 years old, she was out playing with her neighbors. She came home early and took a nap, and her parents thought she was still out, so they decided to go to the grocery store. By the time the girl woke up, the power had gone out, so it was dark as hell, and since she didn't know her parents weren't home, she called out for her mum. After getting no response, she started hearing noises from the basement, but since no one ever went down there, she didn't bother checking it out. The noises became scratching sounds like someone was dragging themselves across the floor. Scared shitless, the girl hid behind the sofa till her parents got home, and despite that only being like 20 minutes, it felt like 9 hours at least. Her parents went into the basement to find everything ransacked with scratches all over the floor and the back door wide open. So I don't know what creature or person this was that did this, but it's safe to say I definitely don't envy this girl. Coming in at number 5 is the No-Faced Man. This one's from Isabella Morris, who shared that her aunt moved into a house where an entire family had died previously due to a fire. I would honestly not move into that house knowing that information, but her aunt's a ballsy one clearly. Anyway, her aunt's oldest son's room used to be in the basement, and he recalls having horrifying nightmares involving a man called Charles who had no face and glowing red eyes. Charles would drag him off his bed and into open flames, and the son swore he could feel his skin burning. It just felt too real to be dreams. It was so bad that he'd crawl to the corner of his room crying, and mind you, he was 20 years old. Can you imagine being so scared of a dream that you're literally in the corner of your room crying? Like, how bad does it have to be for you to do that? At number 4 is the JONBENET Ramsey house. So this was a pretty famous cold murder case that there's even a Netflix show about now. But if you don't know the story, 6-year-old JONBENET Ramsey, a child beauty queen, was murdered in her family home in Boulder, Colorado. Her parents found a 2.5-page ransom note in their kitchen asking them for $118,000. Her body was later found in the basement, and the autopsy concluded she had a broken skull and she was strangled to death. The parents were initially suspects in the murder, but an unknown male's DNA was found on JONBENET's body, and so the DNA evidence cleared the parents. But things were just weird. They just weren't adding up. Like, why would a murderer take the time to write a lengthy ransom note in their house and risk being caught? Why would they ask for a ransom that was literally the amount the parents were getting as bonuses that year? Like, they had to have some kind of information. Either way, things just seemed off, but there was no evidence against the family, and so the case was never solved. JONBENET's mum went into a Valium daze after the murder, and 5 days after it happened, they appeared on CNN, which just doesn't sound like the normal morning process parents go through. Either way, the family moved away from Boulder to get away from the memory of it all, I guess, and the house was put on sale. It was bought by a couple in 2004, and they moved in with their 4 kids before even realizing their kids went to the same school as JONBENET did. Personally, I just couldn't live in a house where something like that happened. I would always just be thinking about it, whether it would happen to my kids. If it happened once, it can happen again. Just paranoid all around. Filling our number 3 slot is the Winchester Mystery House. Rifle heiress Sarah Winchester constructed and built this ever-growing house. Now, it started off as a house in 1822, but Sarah kept adding to it till it became a 160-room mansion. The mansion included doors and stairwells that led nowhere, rooms that were literally useless, and Sarah made it a habit to sleep in a different room every night, which was problematic when an earthquake collapsed 3 floors of her house and she was found stuck in a room obscured by rubble. Now, there are many theories as to why Sarah kept adding to the house. The first was that she was trying to relive happier times after her husband died. They had a great time building their previous home, so maybe it was like a I'm doing this and he's looking down on me sort of thing. The second theory was philanthropic. She employed dozens of carpenters who worked around the clock shifts every day for 36 years. And they were paid a lot better than normal workers, so some say it was that, but I highly doubt it because that's just a boring reason. Now, the third reason is that Sarah was scared. She was scared of being haunted by all the people who were killed by her family's rifles. She met with a medium and decided the best way to appease the souls was to build enough rooms in the house for all of them. The home was a proper labyrinth. There were rooms within rooms, doors that opened into walls, interior facing windows, just a bunch of weird things intended to confuse the dead. Now at number 2 is the rattling. So this story was shared by James, who said every night at 3 AM he would hear sounds coming from the vents on his ceiling. He assumed it was the AC or some small rodent of some kind in the piping, but eventually the sounds changed into what sounded like a pill bottle rattling in his roommate's bathroom. This started happening every night at 3:30 AM sharp for months. Other times he would just be sitting on the couch watching TV and he'd feel like someone just came and sat down next to him. There would even be an indent in the sofa even though no one was there. James reported the feeling of also being watched at all times, and not that it seemed threatening, he just didn't enjoy the potential ghost in his house. Things went horribly wrong one night though when at 3:30 AM both roommates camped outside the bathroom waiting for the sound. They heard the rattling and then went inside. They turned the lights on to find blood in the sink and on the light switch despite neither of them bleeding and no one being in the bathroom. Don't mind me while I just shred their lease into a million pieces and become homeless, since I'd rather do that than live over there. And finally, at number 1 is the Amityville Horror House. So this one is a very famous one, but if you haven't heard about it, come out from the rock you're living under and let's get you knowledgeable. Now, the house is located in Long Island, New York, and on November 13th, 1974, Ronald Defoe Jr. murdered 6 of his family members at the house by going room to room and shooting each and every one of them. According to Ronald, he kept hearing voices in the house telling him to murder his family, and the house remained empty for a year after that. Then the Lutz family moved in, only surviving in the house for 28 days before moving the hell out. During the time they lived there, they insisted on getting the house blessed because let's face it, it was reeking of bad juju. The family claimed they heard their doors banging, knives would get thrown off the kitchen counters, they'd hear voices as well like Ronald. George, the dad of the Lutz family, claimed he saw his wife levitating above their bed, and he even saw a red-eyed pig sort of creature and slime oozing from the walls. But the weirdest part for me was the fact that George Lutz would get woken up every day at 3:15 AM, which was the exact same time Ronald started his murder rampage. 28 days? I would have been out there in 10 minutes, mate. Nope. No.
Starting off strong here with a crocodile in this woman's house. This would freak me out. Well, this crocodile comes in at number 10.
Ben, that's it. Open the door. Good girl.
Okay, what the heck? This thing has a name. You named it? And why did she open the door willingly? I mean, this is a beast that can easily eat you for breakfast. And you're fine with this?
Yes, you do. That's a good girl.
I think someone needs to get this woman a goldfish, maybe a pet dog, because having a pet alligator just isn't normal. But this woman even knows how stupid and dangerous this is. In her video, in the description part, it says, don't ever try to approach or feed a crocodile, with 2 exclamation marks at the end of it. I think this is a huge recipe for disaster, and if you're lonely, there are free dating sites out there. Download Tinder and start swiping. And don't you dare pose with the crocodile as your profile picture. From a scary croc to now finding a woman living in your attic is next up at number 9. I couldn't believe this one. Maybe I should have saved this for number 1, because what's scarier than living with someone for like a year and you didn't even know about it? You weren't even collecting rent.
When Davis Wallman got to his Green Lake home, he noticed some lights on.
I don't immediately
freak out, but I'm like, this is not ordinary.
He didn't think too much of it until a strange noise startled him.
Imagine going into your attic and you see a bed and some food wrappers everywhere. And you know what? This is actually more common than you think. I was able to find so many videos of people living in people's attics and even basements.
How creepy is this? A surveillance camera catches a man crawling around an attic. Down below, this family's bedroom, where this couple sleeps. Next to the bed, their 10-month-old baby girl's crib.
I mean, come on, what is wrong with people? The neighbor has been going inside of their house for years. The couple noticed some lights piercing through the ceiling, so that's when they installed surveillance cameras. Well, this is what they were able to capture. The neighbor was this old man who just likes to watch from afar. A snake lair brings us to number 8. A young couple just bought their dream house and they were excited to begin their new life together. But their plans came to an abrupt halt when they discovered that they weren't living alone. They started to hear rustling sounds within their walls, so they decided to look behind a wall and dozens of snakes came bursting out. The homeowners decided to check out their crawl space beneath their house, and they were even more shocked to find their dream home was sitting on top of a gigantic snake pit. It literally looks like Satan's lair.
Square on top of a snake den where the serpents sleep, breed, and multiply by the hundreds with no way out but up through the house.
Things get even worse. The snakes poisoned their tap water, and the snakes have been releasing a gross musk, which raises their chances of getting salmonella and tapeworms. I mean, no thanks. The couple had to declare bankruptcy because they couldn't afford to fix their home. Well, I hope that their new home is snake free. Swimming into number 7, we have a shark tank. I'm not even exaggerating. Officers from the New York State Department of Environment Conservation found 7 live sharks in an above ground pool. And this was found in someone's basement. Take a look at this.
15-foot above ground pool in the basement of a home in the town of LaGrangeville. You got that? It's a pool in the basement above ground.
Is this for real? What kind of person thinks to themselves, you know what this house needs? A frickin' shark tank. How do you even go about executing this plan? And how the hell does one buy 7 sharks without raising suspicion? Once the police entered the basement, they found 7 live sandbar sharks, 2 dead leopard sharks, and a dead hammerhead shark. I mean, a dead hammerhead shark? This house is located in New York State. I can't believe that something like this actually happened. The police said that the homeowner was probably breeding these sharks to sell them to private collectors. This guy couldn't even keep the sharks alive. What a bad business owner. Whatever happened to owning a pet hamster? I guess those days are long over. Next up, number 6. This next one would freak me out. Someone on Reddit wrote about one of their experiences, and this is what they said. In my sophomore year of college, my friends and I decided we wanted to rent a house. My mom was handling all of my loans at the time, well, just the paperwork, not the actual paying of said loans, so she wouldn't let me move in, but I hung there a lot. We were checking out the house and looked behind this big furnace, only to find a door that couldn't be seen from the main walkway, and the realtor obviously didn't know about it because she didn't show it to us. We went in and the lights didn't seem to work, so we brought a flashlight. As we walked into the room, we noticed it smells really stuffy, and it's pretty apparent that no one has been in there for a very long time. Upon further investigation, we found that there was a noose hanging from a 1,000-pound bracing unit, and that was located on the ceiling, and there was all kinds of things written all over the walls, plus a bunch of old junk that had been thrown in there. We're not sure what happened in that house, and nobody knew about the room, so we cut down the noose and never went in that room again. Is this real life right now? Was this like a secret kill room? I mean, it's very, very plausible. I wonder how many people have been hung there, or you know what? I don't really want to know that answer, but we should definitely start an investigation inside that house because we might have a serial killer on our hands. Flying into number 5, we have bats. A family was devastated when they discovered that their new house was actually infested with hundreds of bats. I mean, not one bat. We're talking about multiple. I mean, they must have had a terrible real estate agent and home inspector, because how do you miss 100 bats? The bats had taken over the attic, walls, and ceiling. Bats return to the same spot every year. So even if you tried to get rid of them, they will probably come back the following year. They'll find their way. It is estimated that this family was living with approximately, get this, like 800 Bats. That is a terrible real estate agent. And who inspected that house? They could hear them inside the walls, they can smell them, and they're able to see them from time to time. This is actually so terrifying and disgusting all at the same time. This entire list is making me scared to buy a house, and I guess it's safe to say you never know what could be lurking behind your walls. Next up, number 4, we have dungeons. One man was stunned when he moved into his new apartment and discovered a trap door in front of his bathroom. Naturally, the man thought it would be a good idea to explore his sketchy looking tunnel that looks like it can collapse at any moment. At first he thought that this room wasn't strange at all until he noticed a set of stairs. As it turns out, the house was built over an old English monastery, and it had a series of passages underneath the house. These creepy passages led to rooms that looked like dungeons from your worst nightmare. Who knows what is inside of these rooms? All I know for certain is that I wouldn't stick around to find out. Up next, things get even more creepier with mummified remains, and this brings us to number 3. Imagine if you just bought a new house and you go down into the basement and explore, but you end up finding some very old mummified remains. I'd probably call up my realtor and tell her to put this house on the market again, because there's no way I would be living in a house with a creepy old dusty mummies in my basement. So back in 2010, a woman sadly discovered these mummified remains of 2 newborn infants, and it was sealed in a trunk in the basement. The trunk had the 2 infants, and also there was Peter Pan merchandise inside of it. The trunk belonged to a woman named Janet M. Berry, and those were her children, but the circumstances that led her to bury her children in the trunk is a mystery. This might be the creepiest thing I've ever heard of all day, so you know what? It's time to move on. An underground prison locks itself in at number 2. Rewind to 2013, a man named Ariel Castro was arrested. They discovered that he had been keeping young women imprisoned in his basement for years. Between the years of 2000 and 2004, these young girls had been kidnapped by Ariel Castro, and they were kept in a small bedroom and fed only once per day. They were constantly abused, and they were only able to bathe when he thought it was necessary. Luckily, a neighbor saw the woman when they tried to break free, and he helped them to escape. He became known as a local hero.
Something was wrong when a little pretty white girl ran into a black man's arms. Something is wrong here.
Finally, at number 1, we saved the scariest for last. We have done it again, guys, and we have an anaconda found inside of a house. Okay, quick, someone called J-Lo. We need to get rid of this thing ASAP, or maybe Nicki Minaj. So this guy found a gigantic anaconda slithering around his house, and this is what he decided to do about it. Does this guy want to die? I'd literally run out of my house and live on the streets. I'd accept the fact that this anaconda owns my house and could take over my mortgage, because there's no way I'm ever stepping inside of that house ever again. Even if they remove it, I mean, how did it even get there in the first place? I don't know what possessed him to touch this beast, but I think I can safely say that this guy doesn't make very good life decisions, and if he keeps up his bad habits of touching large creatures that can swallow you whole, I don't see him lasting long.
Starting us off with number 10 is Rose Hall Part 1. Now this one is a lot to digest, so listen up. Rose Hall was built back in 1770 in Jamaica and was home to Annie Palmer and her husband. It was also a sugarcane plantation. Yes, it was one of those times. Yikes. A while into their marriage, Annie got bored of her husband and started sleeping with slaves on the plantation, but in order to keep them quiet, she would either kill them or get other slaves to kill them. And this woman's evil legit knows no bounds. She poisoned her first husband for his wealth, and then later killed her second and third husband as well. Her sexual rendezvous continued, and anyone that didn't comply would end up in the 16 feet deep pit she had dug under the house. She's like the Jamaican Marie Laveau, and it gets worse. It gets so much worse, it's not even funny. Coming in at number 9 is Rose Hall Part 2. Now Annie actually grew up in Haiti and had learned voodoo from her nanny, which eventually earned her the nickname the White Witch on the island. Apparently one of her housekeepers had caught the eye of one of her lovers, and she performed a fatal voodoo spell on her. Now later the grandfather of that housekeeper later strangled Annie to death, and she was kept in a coffin located in the eastern wing of the hall. Anyone who moved there after claimed they saw many apparitions, including that of Annie and all the people that she had killed. This lady was crazy, you guys, and honestly, if I could get the apparitions that were against her on my side, I wouldn't mind living in that house. But I mean, if they hated me, it would just be hell, really. At number 8, we have LEMP, a mansion located in St. Louis, Missouri. This mansion has seen its fair bit of tragedy, probably enough tragedy for a lifetime. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Now, this mansion has 33 rooms altogether and was built by William LEMP sometime in the 1860s. William and his wife had 4 sons, and after their youngest, Frederick, died, William ended up committing suicide shortly after. So death count right now is at 2. A few years later, William's wife died of cancer in the house, which makes death count at 3. By 1922, William Jr. ended up shooting himself in the same room his dad committed suicide in. Death count at 4. If that honestly isn't horrible enough, in 1949, William's 3rd son Charles shot his dog in the basement of the house and then went up to his bedroom and killed himself. Death count 6. The house ended up being sold the same year and turned into a boarding house when obviously the hauntings began. So I don't know about you, but I would legit not go outside for the next months instead of having to live in this house. I'm not living there. No. Filling on the 7th slot, we have HAUGHT Mansion. Photographer Seth Lawless traveled around the US to find 13 abandoned haunted houses, and HAUGHT Mansion in Brush Park, Michigan was one of them. Now, back in the 1940s, the mansion was actually a brothel for upscale gentlemen, and sometimes upscale gentlemen can be the scum of the earth. Years later, after its closure, countless dead bodies were found in the cellar of the mansion, and there was peculiar detail with each one. Each body had a perfect circle on their torso chest area. The house itself is falling apart, it's decrepit, and I would not want to be inside there for the life of me. And if we're talking about quarantining in that house, where they drew circles on dead bodies like some satanic cult, then my answer is 150% no. Now at number 6 is the House of Death. I didn't even make up that title, that's actually what the house is called, and how ominous is that? Located in Greenwich Village, New York, this house was constructed back in the 1850s, and a record 22 people have died in this house. And yes, that means the house is also haunted by 22 ghosts, which is honestly 25 more than I'd like. Mark Twain lived in the house at the beginning of the 1900s, and his ghost has been seen on the 1st floor near the staircase. The family home was turned into a 10-unit apartment building, and the first couple that moved in there felt a monstrous moving shadow just looming over them at all times. The actress Jan Bartel, who felt the shadow, wrote a memoir about her experiences at the house, how she felt hands brushing her neck and this rotting odor that was just always present. She'd have visions of seeing people, and when the couple called a medium, the person felt many dead things under the floorboards. Safe to say, unless these 22 ghosts are paying rent, I'm not sharing a house with them, quarantining with them, or otherwise. Oh hell no, miss me with that shit. Coming in at number 5 is the WHALEY House. Located in San Diego, the house was built on the execution grounds of James Robinson, aka Yankee Jim. In the year 1852, he was convicted of grand larceny and sentenced to death. While setting up his noose, the hangman did it wrong, which meant Jim's feet were able to graze the ground, making his hanging even longer. 4 years later, Thomas Whaley bought the land and built his house, and his youngest daughter Lillian claimed she'd hear the ghost of Jim just around the house. Boots walking around, sinister laughing, and the sound of boots scraping the ground like they would have been while he was being hanged. And as appealing as this house sounds to be quarantined in, I will pass. At number 4 is the Joshua Ward House. Located in Essex County, the house belonged to Sheriff George the Strangler Corwin back in the day, and he may not ring a bell, but he was actually the High Sheriff of the county during the Salem witch trials. He was known throughout the county to strangle the accused by tying necks and heels, which means he would force a person's body into hoops, and he would rope their neck to their feet until blood came gushing out of their mouth and nose. Everyone hated this man. He even stoned an 80-year-old farmer to death who refused to stand trial for witchcraft. Like, come on, George, the guy's 80 years old. Give him a break, right? George ended up having a heart attack later on and died. His family was so scared a riot crowd would dismember his body that they interned his body in their house's cellar. The house is now a bed and breakfast called the Merchant and is apparently one of the most haunted houses in New England. And I'm not trying to be here for any of that, considering I'd be stuck there for months. No. Filling our number 3 slot is the cottage in BELMEZ. Located in Spain, this cottage was built on top of burial grounds that dated back to 1830. Maria Gomez Pereira lived in the house, and in 1971 she discovered a face looking up at her from the kitchen floor. It wasn't a 2D ghost, it was a face made from plaster casting, and it seemed like the face was just rising from the dead from underneath the house. Freaked out and worried, Maria and her neighbors decided to get rid of the face by chipping away at it with an axe, but that ended up revealing even more face casts of old men, of little children, you name it. No one even knows who made them, how they got there, why they were there, nothing. But I, for one, wouldn't even live in this house, let alone be stuck in it. Who's living there? Who is living there? Maria, get out! Now at number 2 is Charles. This one's from Isabella Morris, who shared that her aunt moved into a house where an entire family had died previously due to a fire. I would honestly not move into that house knowing that information, but I mean, people are ballsy. Anyway, her aunt's oldest son's room used to be in the basement, and he recalled having horrifying nightmares involving a man called Charles who had no face and glowing red eyes. Charles would drag him off his bed and into open flames, and the son swore he could feel his skin actually burning, like it just felt all too real to be a dream. It was so bad that he crawled to the corner of his room just crying. Mind you, he's a 20-year-old man. Can you imagine being so scared of a dream that you're literally just in the corner of your room in a ball crying? Can you imagine being stuck in that basement till September in quarantine with 0 windows or natural light, wondering what you did to deserve that? Screw you, COVID-19. Screw you. And finally, at number 1 is the rattling. This story was shared by James, who said every night at 3 AM, he would hear sounds coming from the vents on his ceiling. He assumed it was the AC or some small rodent in the piping, but eventually the sounds changed to what sounded like a pill bottle rattling in his roommate's bathroom. This started happening every night at 3 AM sharp for months. Other times he would just be sitting on the couch watching TV, and he'd feel like someone just came and sat down next to him. James reported the feeling of being watched at all times, and not that it seemed threatening, he just didn't enjoy the potential ghosts that could be living in his house. Things went horribly wrong though one night when at 3:30 AM both roommates camped outside the bathroom, heard the rattling, and then went inside. They turned the lights on to find blood in the sink and on the light switch despite neither of them bleeding and no one being in the bathroom. That's a major, super, big fat no for me.
Getting us scared in at number 10 is John SOWDEN and his house in Los Angeles. It's time to brace yourselves because this story is pretty dark. Back on January 15th, 1947, a woman's body was found on this lot. Her murder became one of the most reported murders of the time because of the gruesome way in which her body had been found. She was surgically cut in half from the waist down, washed, cleaned, and posed by her killer. Residents who have since lived there have reported hearing strange noises, such as the dragging of heavy chains, heavy footsteps, and voices calling their name. It's actually a really nice looking house, but it is full of negative energy, and it is also believed that anyone who steps foot in this house will be cursed. So, you know what? I'm good at just admiring the architecture from like Google Maps. I don't even have to see it in real life. The Queen Mary ship creeps onto this list at number 9. I had to include this one on this list because people technically did live on this ship, and it is referred to as one of the most haunted ships in America. It was operated since the 1930s, but now it is permanently docked in Long Beach, California, and it is used as a hotel. As nice as this might sound, while guests on board will often experience sleepless nights, there have been a bunch of scary paranormal activities reported on this ship. Guests will say that they will hear creepy kid laughter in the middle of the night, or things will be flown across the room. And room B340 has been taken out of rotation after there's been numerous violent poltergeist activities. It's actually impossible to keep someone in that room for the entire night because they will just get scared away. For me, I would probably last a minute. Probably not even that long. Up next, number 8, we have the Stanley Warehouse. This is a notorious haunted house that has a long reputation of being one of the most haunted places in Orange County. One of the most talked about frightening ghosts that live here is the previous owner. During her golden years, she was unable to climb up the stairs, so after her death, she is known to appear in spirit on the staircase, blocking others from going up. Visitors have reported that they found it difficult or even impossible to get past her and go up the stairs. Oh, and let's not forget about the spirit of an old man who you can hear whispering nasty and offensive things while you sleep. And if you visit the house, you will be able to hear a baby crying upstairs, but when you go into the nursery, no one is there. That would freak me out. I think I would want to visit this house just to see if I can make it upstairs, but you'll never convince me to sleep there. I mean, I just value my life way too much, and I gotta find out what happens next on Bachelor in Paradise. Moving into number 7, we have the Battery Point Lighthouse. This is an iconic lighthouse located in Crescent City, California, and it was built back in 1856. There has been numerous reports of strange and creepy occurrences happening there. Lighthouse workers and guests say that they have heard what sounded like someone wearing large boots stomping around. There have also been reports of items moving, cold spots, and the feeling that someone was touching them when no one was even there. Apparently there are 3 ghosts that haunt this lighthouse, because one just isn't enough. No one seems to know who they are or why they are haunting this place. All I know for sure is that we should just board up the place and just leave it alone, just forget about it. Every now and again a visitor will feel someone tapping on their shoulder, or furniture will move by itself. I mean, that is definitely not okay, and definitely you don't want to be there on a stormy night. Bad things are said to happen there when it rains. The Whaley house haunts us in at number 6. This house was built on an old site where the public executions used to occur. So yeah, I would say this place is pretty damn haunted. Over the years, many descendants of the Whaley family lived and died in that house, and when the house was being restored, workers and visitors began to notice strange and mysterious sounds, sightings, smells, and encounters. A lot of people reported hearing scary noises and loud footsteps that left footprints. You can actually visit this house and take a tour, but I'd rather not. I'd rather spend my time at Disneyland, where I know it's 100% safe and not too scary, or is it? This place is littered with scary ghosts, and a lot of unsettling things have happened there. I'm getting the chills just thinking about it, so I gotta move on. Let's move on, let's see what we have next. Well, you know what? The red house jumps into number 5 next on our list. This is an old abandoned house that is occupied by a vengeful spirit. Back in the beginning of the 20th century, an engaged couple used to live here. Well, on the night before their wedding, they had a huge fight, and the man pushed his fiancée down the stairs. She died, and he buried her in the backyard. Well, today, she has been seen haunting the house and nearby businesses. People have reported that she is wearing her wedding dress that is covered in blood. Is it her own blood? And local legends say that if you step in front of her, she'll rush forward and drag you to her gravesite, and you will never be seen again. Okay, I don't think I'm gonna be visiting this creepy thing anytime soon, or any of these haunted houses on this list. I'm just not brave enough. Like I told you, I hear wind and I run. I see something just a bit bigger than a chihuahua and I run. Okay, the Glen Tavern Inn creeps us in at number 4. This house was built in 1911, but don't be fooled by its beautiful exterior. This house has a very ugly past. Back during the Prohibition, they converted the 3rd floor into a speakeasy, brothel, and gambling den. And one of the most infamous rooms is room 307, which is said to be haunted by 2 ghosts. The amount of paranormal activity here is very high. Visitors said that they saw children running through the halls, and some say that they've seen an angry man and a one-eyed female. There are also reports of the spirits playing the piano in the middle of the night, and others have said that their stuff was stolen. There have also been a lot of deaths that have occurred in this room. A cowboy was shot to death, and a woman was beheaded and left in a closet. So needless to say, this place has a lot of angry and vengeful spirits. Las Coches Adobe makes it onto this list at number 3. This might be one of the most terrifying places in California, and you know what's even more terrifying? The fact that I probably pronounced it wrong. This building is located on an old mine site, however it was covered up because on one horrific day, an accident occurred in the mine and about 30 workers were trapped inside. All of them lost their lives, so it's no wonder that this place is haunted. Locals and visitors have said that they heard the screams of the trapped miners echoing from the property, and there are also also numerous reports of a lady in black and a male phantom walking around the grounds. Some people have even said that they've seen the ghost of a hanging man from a tree. And then we have the dark force. Locals say that this force is strong enough to throw you to the ground, and then you can feel heavy footsteps walking on your back, preventing you from getting up. There are a bunch of people who have said that they will never step foot in this place again, and I'm one of them. I don't blame them. Number 2, we have the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose. Since it was built in 1884, the mansion is said to be haunted by ghosts who were killed with Winchester rifles. Construction began in 1884 and never stopped until the owner died in 1992. The owner believed that her house was haunted by victims, and the only way to keep them quiet was to keep on building. The building was opened by the public in 1923, and the staff and the visitors have reported seeing mischievous spirits who liked to torment them. So yeah, don't be fooled by this beautiful house, because it is actually full of ugly surprises and scary ghosts lurking in every corner. But for those of you guys who are either brave or really naive, well, you can actually take a tour there and see all of the ghosts and scary paranormal activities for yourself. Alcatraz tops this list at number 1. Prisons are often the site of restless spirits and hauntings, and Alcatraz is no exception to that. This prison was the site of violent activities, and it housed some of the most dangerous criminals in the world. Alcatraz is actually a breeding ground for the paranormal. One of the most feared presence on the island is known as the Thing. This creepy spirit has red glowing eyes, and it has been recently seen by visitors and also by the prison staff when Alcatraz was in operation. Other common reportings are of creepy voices, sobbing, screaming, and the banging of cell doors. Some have even said that they felt as if they were being touched, felt cold, and they even had an emotional outburst of either sadness or anger just out of nowhere. Well, there you guys have it. This is the end of the video. I was your host, Landon Do Not Sing, and thank you guys so much for watching this video. We'll see you guys all in the next most amazing top 10 video.